Ladies and gentlemen, please rise as you are able for the presentation of colors by the 377th Theater Sustainment Command of the United States Army Reserve and the Louisiana Army National Guard, and the national anthems of the Republic of France and the United States of America, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allons enfants de la patrie, le jour de gloire est arrivé. Contre nous de la tyrannie, l'étendard sanglant élevé, l'étendard sanglant élevé. Entendez-vous dans les campagnes mugir ces féroces soldats? Ils viennent jusque dans vos bras, égorger vos fils, vos campagnes. Aux armes, citoyens, formez vos bataillons, marchons, marchons, qu'un sang peur après nos sillons.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
Right, please. Forward, march. Left.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hope and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms on other fronts, you will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, the elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe, and security for ourselves in a free world. Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened. He will fight savagely. But this is the year 1944. Much has happened since the Nazi triumphs of 1940-41. The United Nations have inflicted upon the Germans great defeats in open battle, man to man. Our air offensive has seriously reduced their strength in the air and their capacity to wage war on the ground. Our home fronts have given us an overwhelming superiority in weapons and munitions of war, and placed at our disposal great reserves of trained fighting men. The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking. Attention! Present arms.
Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests and members of our community today, we pay tribute to the extraordinary courage of our World War II veterans, home front workers, and Holocaust survivors, whose resilience inspires us all. Please give tribute to the heroes and survivors of World War II.
Order! Arms!
And ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chaplain Major Tori Garrison of the United States Air Force Reserve to deliver our invocation.
The absolute hardest group I've ever had to follow. I just want you guys to know that. Shall we pray? Eternal God, our refuge, our strength, on this solemn day we gather in the shadow of history, on sacred ground, to remember an event that changed the course of the world. 81 years ago today, on the beaches of Normandy, Omaha, Utah, Gold, Juneau, and Sword, the largest amphibious invasion in history began. Our Allied troops crossed the English Channel to confront tyranny and defend the hope of freedom. We remember with reverence the courage of the men who waded through the waves of gunfire, soldiers, sailors, airmen, and medics, many no older than our own sons and daughters. Remember those who made it off the sand and those who lived but carried the burden of memory. We honor their sacrifice, not just with ceremony, but with the lives of liberty they secured for us. Lord, bless the veterans who are still with us, guardians of living memory, and the families of those who never came home. May their legacy remind us that freedom is never free, and that unity of purpose, forged in justice, can overcome the darkest of nights. As we gather here at the World War II Museum, surrounded by history and its sacred reminders, stir within us a deep gratitude. May this celebration not only recall a decisive moment in battle, but reawaken a commitment to peace, service, and courage in our own time. We ask your blessing on today's remembrance, on this nation, and all who stand for what is right, then, now, and always. Amen and amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the Chair of the Board of Trustees of the National World War II Museum, Suzanne Metier.
What a wonderful group of people here today. Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us today here at the National World War II Museum to commemorate this very momentous anniversary. I am honored to welcome you to the Dr. Hal Baumgarten D-Day commemorative ceremony. And today's program will also recognize the 25th anniversary of this museum. Before we begin, I'd like to honor a long-standing museum tradition and recognize some very important people who are here with us. We are so privileged to have 23 members of the World War II generation here with us today. So please stand if you would, or wave from your chairs so that we can salute your service to our country. Let me begin with Ambassador Theodore Ted Britton of the U.S. Marine Corps. Victor Cheney of the U.S. Army. Maud Dami, a Holocaust survivor. Thomas Ed Davis, U.S. Navy. James Jim Deal, U.S. Army. The Honorable Stephen Ellis, U.S. Navy. Richard Ensign, U.S. Navy. Tolly Fletcher, U.S. Navy. Prejean Fontenot, U.S. Army. Shirley Guidry, U.S. Army. Edward Tresh Sr., U.S. Merchant Marine. Kenneth Marr, U.S. Army. Robert Morgan Stewart, U.S. Merchant Marine. Jesse McGee, U.S. Army. Edward Crawford, U.S. Army. Ann Levy, Holocaust survivor. Norman Plaisance, U.S. Marine Corps. Nicole Spangenberg, French resistance fighter. Robert Lowry, U.S. Navy. Alonzo Jack Emerson, U.S. Army Air Corps. Joseph Duquana III, U.S. Navy. Colonel Charles Petty, U.S. Army. And Rodney Williams, U.S. Navy. Folks, it just doesn't get better than this. This is really wonderful. Thank you to all of you for being here. Your stories are so inspirational to all of us, and it is an honor to have you here at this museum, your museum. And so thank you, thank you, thank you. One more round of applause. I would also like to take a moment to recognize our active duty military or veterans of any conflict. So if you would please stand or wave so that you can be recognized, we'd love to see who you are and where you are. Please stand, and thank you. Thank you all for your service and for being here today. It's also our pleasure to welcome the Honorable Rodolphe Sambou, Consul General of the French Republic in Louisiana. Mr. Consul General, thank you for joining us. And our Consul General was also with us this morning for the H-hour ceremony, so he's had an early start, and we really appreciate your remarks at that event as well. I'd also like to thank Charlton McGinley, who is the Secretary of the Louisiana Department of Veterans Affairs, for being here today, and he may be in the back, and if you are, if you please raise your hand so that we can recognize, and thank you for being here. Today we recognize the immense sacrifice of the Allied troops who invaded the beaches of Normandy on June 6, 1944. At the beginning of this program, we heard a reading of General Eisenhower's order of the day to his troops 81 years ago as they embarked on the Great Crusade that would ultimately change the course of the war. The impact of D-Day was so profound that it became the inspiration for our founder, Dr. Stephen Ambrose, to enlist his friend and University of New Orleans colleague, Dr. Nick Mueller, to create this museum, which opened 25 years ago today as the National D-Day Museum. We are pleased to have with us today members of the Ambrose family up in front here, as well as Dr. Mueller, Nick Mueller, and you will be hearing from Nick later in the program. So let's give them a round of applause, please. I was fortunate enough to actually be at the grand opening 25 years ago, and I'm presuming that many of you were as well. So if you would please, we want to recognize, raise your hand or stand if you actually attended the grand opening 25 years ago. I knew there'd be a crowd of us. Right. Yep. And we do want to remember those who have been with this museum for so long. And so we have 3 volunteers here with us today who were at the grand opening. And so I'd like to recognize then Ronnie Aboud. If you would, Ronnie, nice to have you. There we go. And next to Ronnie, we have Joyce Dunn. And yes, Ms. Dunn. There we go. Wonderful. Thank you. And Sandy Hecker. Got it. I also understand that we have with us today 2 of the museum's early staff members, Gail Newchurch and Kenneth Hoffman. So if you all would please rise or raise your hands, we'd love to recognize you as well. They're here somewhere. Ah, there you are. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you all for being with us 25 years ago, and thanks for being here today. You know, though the museum has expanded into the National World War II Museum, our vision has never wavered, and that's a testament to the dedication of our leadership and the vast network of supporters. I'd like to acknowledge all of my fellow trustees at this museum, past and present, as well as members of our Presidential Council's Advisory Committee. So if all of you would raise your hand or stand to be recognized, please. Thank you. And speaking of a network of supporters, we have Patriot Circle members and charter members of this museum, as well as our capital and programmatic supporters in attendance. So if all of you would raise your hand, you've been tremendously supportive, and we really appreciate it. Thank you. Here at the museum, the personal stories of the World War II generation remain at the heart of our work. One of those personal stories is that of Dr. Hal Baumgarten. We are privileged to have some members of Dr. Baumgarten's family here with us in the audience, including his wife, Mrs. Rita Baumgarten, his daughter Karen and her husband Leopold Sher, and his granddaughters Samantha and Rose Sher. Thank you all for being here with us. Now I'd like to turn your attention to the screens to hear Dr. Baumgarten's story, which is particularly meaningful today of all days. Thank you.
In this poignant hour, I ask you to join with me in prayer. We shall prevail over the unholy forces of our enemy. Lead us to the saving of our country and a peace that will let all men live in freedom. Thy will be done, Almighty God.
June 6, 1944. Minutes after midnight, a surprise attack takes place. And as the sun rises, Western Allies launch the largest amphibious operation in history, the invasion of Normandy. Over 150,000 Allied troops will storm the beaches. One of those men is Hal Baumgarten.
The boats hit the water, were thrown around like matchsticks. Every man was immediately soaked with the icy cold English Channel water. The first thing I saw, a Company B boat on my left, port side, blew up, hit a mine. We were showered with wood, metal, and body parts. When our ramp went down, the signal for every machine gun on that beach to open up on the exit to our ship. So Harold Donaldson, the lieutenant, was gunned down in the boat like you see in Saving Private Ryan. The fellow in front of me, Clarice Riggs, was machine gunned on the ramp. I dove in behind him. Only my left side of my helmet was creased by a bullet. They put these combat jackets on these guys. I didn't wear it because my best buddy, he said, Hal, don't wear that jacket. It's liable to drown you. Now I listened to him because he was an old man. He was 25 years old and I was only a kid of 19. So I listened to Robert Garbett. I was standing in neck-deep, bloody water. There were a group of us running across the beach. A machine gun spray came from the trenches. I heard a loud thud on my right front, and my rifle vibrated. I turned it over. There was a clean hole through its receiver. A fellow named Nicholas Kafkalis was next to me. When this fellow was cut in half, crawled up to me with his last breath, handed me back both pieces of rifle. I spent years thinking why he would do a stupid thing like that. And I realized things were so one-sided on that beach. He wanted me to continue firing. I saw the machine gunner up there by the glare, the shine on his helmet. I shot at him. No more firing from that machine gun. A shell went off in front of me, 88 millimeter. It blew off this cheek, gave me a hole in the roof of my mouth. This jaw was shot away, and I looked into my left front, and Bedford Hoback of Bedford, Virginia, got hit with the same shell and went under the 4 inches of water. He was dead. Now, there are only 2 of us alive from my boat team, Charles Connor and myself. We had 85% casualties first 15 minutes. At the base of the seawall was my best buddy, face down in the sand. He was probably shot by a sniper. I was crying mad. I looked at my best buddy, and my bloody tears were dripping down. I gave myself a shot of morphine right under the skin of my left hand. I had a dream, and I thought I heard my buddy, Robert Garbett, with a hand on my shoulder, saying, "Don't worry, Yankee boy, you'll be okay." In fact, this fella Stuart Bryan told me it was a German patrol coming down the road searching the 7 bodies for cigarettes. And this German saw I was alive, and that was him talking to me.
44 years later, Hal Baumgarten returned to Normandy.
We went to the cemetery, and I walked around with my wife, and I saw Lieutenant Donaldson's grave, Nicholas Kafkalis, Bedford Holback, and Captain Robert Ware, and I started to cry, and I looked up at my wife and knelt over the graves, and I said, "These guys can't talk anymore. Nobody will ever know what they did, what their names are, unless I speak about them." Now I met a very important friend who became my hero and my idol and my mentor, Dr. Stephen Ambrose. And he said, "Hal, don't just speak about D-Day, write about it."
Hal Baumgarten became a doctor, practiced medicine for 40 years, and wrote about his experience on D-Day. We remember Hal Baumgarten today and his fellow men from June 1944 who ensured the defeat of Nazi Germany. Their great crusade was won.
Ladies and gentlemen, the former chairman of the D-Day Museum and the founding president and CEO emeritus of the National World War II Museum, Dr. Gordon H. Nick Mueller.
"25 years ago, we cut the ribbon across the street here for the opening of the National D-Day Museum in a ceremony that included my friend and dear friend and late departed now, Stephen Ambrose, the founder and visionary of this museum, along with Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg, Tom Brokaw from NBC, Secretary of Defense Bill Cohen, 6 Medal of Honor recipients who personified the sacrifice and the courage of those who fought on that day. They came to represent those who didn't make it home. Also with us were our board of directors of the museum, as well as donors and members, some of you here today, and volunteers and veterans in the thousands, 9 NATO defense ministers. Their presence, along with yours today, added significance to the memory of those who gave their lives in World War II, and to the importance of opening the first and greatest museum of World War II in America on June 6, 2000. This celebration that day is overwhelming for me to remember and to think about how far we've come since that time. The occasion also gave an indication of a promise of more to come, and you are in the presence of that more to come. Even before we began the campaign to expand to the World War II Museum, the idea was present. 4 years after we opened, the United States Congress designated this museum to be America's official museum on World War II. It was a momentous occasion when we opened, and celebrate that today, 25 years ago. The entire city, the nation, and indeed the world watched as C-SPAN and other networks carried us across the nation live all day long. But it was a very special and emotional day, as you can imagine, for me and my dear friend Stephen Ambrose by my side. It was his idea, and 10 years later, we were there together, laboring with our board of trustees and donors and friends for all those years. Most here know and understand why it was important that someone, somewhere, should build a museum to honor the sacrifice and the courage of those that are here and those that have gone on. That man I just mentioned was Stephen E. Ambrose, professor of history, as you've already heard and know. His daughters Stephanie and Grace are here with their husbands and sons, along with Andrea Ambrose, the widow of Hugh Ambrose. They and my family, Beth and my son Dave and John and Emily, are here as well to celebrate an event that has transformed my life in the last 25 years, for sure. But we're all here to commemorate not only the birthday of the museum, but more important, the story that we are telling about America's role in defeating tyranny on D-Day, June 6, 1944, which was the pivot point, the turning point of the war in Europe. The invasion of France in World War II was one of the greatest military invasions in world history. Its successful landings were the beginning of the end of the greatest threat to Western civilization and to democracy. This monumental Allied operation set the stage for the final destruction of Hitler's Third Reich 11 months later. The day before the invasion, 80 years ago, in the early morning hours of June 5th, the massive armada of ships and planes and landing craft were secretly waiting in harbors around England and Ireland and Scotland. Those morning hours was a fateful decision on the early morning hours of June 5th. Torrential rain was coming down on the Southwark House in Portsmouth, where the Supreme Allied commanders were meeting with General Eisenhower. Everything was poised for the invasion. Tension was palpable in that room, as Eisenhower was the only one who could make the decision to go or to postpone. But postponement meant the delay of several weeks, and they felt sure that the secret of the place of the landing and the timing of the landing would leak out. It seemed like an eternity to the commanders waiting as Eisenhower paced the room. He stopped suddenly and said, "Okay, let's go." And the generals and the admirals raced from the room to their various command posts to deliver the orders. Ike's directive to his Allied commanders unleashed 6,000 ships, 11,000 planes, 160,000 Allied troops, all united in the mission of piercing Hitler's Atlantic Wall in Normandy the next morning, D-Day. It would be an all-or-nothing attack from the air, the sea, and the land, and as Eisenhower said later, there was no alternate plan. It was one of the biggest gambles in military history, ushering in a fight to the finish between the forces of freedom and democracy on the Allied side versus the forces of dictatorship and world conquest promised by Hitler's fascist and racist regimes. Hitler also knew the stakes were very high when he once remarked, some months before the invasion, that the destruction of the enemy landing on the shores of some place in Europe would be the sole and decisive factor in the conduct of the whole war, and hence its final results. German Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, in charge of the coastal defenses in Normandy, believed the war would be won or lost on the beaches. The stakes could not have been higher. Everything depended on the assault from the sea, and the Higgins boats built right here in New Orleans would be the key to victory in getting the Allied troops ashore against the heavily entrenched defenders. You've seen the amazing story, first-person account of Hal Baumgarten, for whom this commemoration is named today. He had to attack out of water with heavy gear onto bloody Omaha Beach, and as you've heard, wounded 5 times in 24 hours, and was one of the only men of the 116th Infantry Regiment to survive on that day. His courage under fire was remarkable, and he lived to tell his story 25 years ago here on opening night before this museum, and we cut the ribbon. There was also Staff Sergeant Walt Ehlers, a strapping Kansas farm boy, who was later awarded the Medal of Honor for attacking entrenched German machine gun positions, at one point killing 4 enemy soldiers by himself before they had time to react. And though wounded himself, he rallied his squad again and again. And despite his own heroics on that day, the one thing he would have traded his own life, he said, because his brother was killed when his landing craft was hit by a mortar at the water's edge. The Allied assaults on Omaha, Pointe du Hoc, Utah Beach, as well as the Army Air Corps, the bombers, the Navy, the 101st, the 82nd Airborne Divisions performed feats of bravery on that day that will live forever in the annals of history. 1,000 years from now, I am confident historians will look back and wonder at what was accomplished on that day by ordinary citizens. And those soldiers, sailors, and airmen will long be remembered and their stories told in this National World War II Museum. Those who survived those days, and some fortunately here with us today, can rightly claim pride in what was accomplished on that day. But when they're all gone, we will continue to commemorate and tell the story of their deeds, the day the Allies began their final march to victory and left us a world free of those oppressors, free of the Holocaust, and for Americans to continue to live in freedom. That story is told here every day in this great museum. And I'm going to give the last word to the famous British poet Stephen Spender, who penned this eternal tribute to that generation who fought that day and throughout the war. He wrote, "I think of these who were truly great, the names of those who in their lives fought for life, who wore at their hearts the fire's center." Thank you all for coming today to celebrate this birthday of the museum, a quarter century. And I'm going to trust all of you to hold up that torch and carry that torch forward into the future. Those soldiers and sailors and airmen, many of them gave their yesterdays for your tomorrows, as well as honoring those who are still among us. And now, it's your turn to tell those stories to your children. And thank also to the daughter and the family of Hal Baumgarten and his wife, one of the bravest of the brave. Thank you all.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, the President and CEO of the National World War II Museum, Stephen J. Watson.
Good morning, and thank you, Nick. I know this is an emotional and proud day for you, 25 years after that magnificent opening. And I think all of us here today are grateful for the 35 years of leadership and service to the museum and our mission. And I'm going to have a little bit more to say about that in a moment. But let's give Nick a round of applause, please. I also want to add my personal thanks and welcome to the members of the World War II generation that are here today. It's a privilege to call many of you friends, and I think we all felt this morning as you came into this magnificent pavilion that your presence is what is making it so meaningful. I think we all felt it. We all know how significant it is to be here on this important day, this 81st anniversary of D-Day, this 25th anniversary celebration of the museum. And I know many of you have traveled from across the country, so thank you again for being here with us on this important day. I want to give a special shout out to two veterans, Tolly Fletcher, who I had a chance to meet this morning, and an old friend of mine, Robert Lowry. Both are D-Day veterans. And Robert, I know you're ready for this. Mr. Lowry was here on opening day, and he still has his ticket from 25 years ago that he brought with him this morning. So it's always great to see you, Mr. Lowry. But to all of you, your service, your sacrifices, and your victory in World War II literally changed history and the world, so thank you. I also want to give a personal shout out to Rita Baumgarten, who I had a chance to visit with again this morning. And on this day 20 years ago, Rita and Hal and I, and Jeremy Collins, who's backstage right now, were actually at the Vierville Draw on Omaha Beach, listening to Hal tell his story. And it's just always amazing to have a chance to see you and visit with you, Rita. So thank you again for being here this morning. So it'll come as no surprise that here at the museum, we believe that World War II was one of the most consequential events in human history. I think nothing more clearly demonstrates what humanity is capable of, both good and bad, than this monumental moment in history. And we believe that's why it must always be taught and studied, both within and beyond the classroom, and of course, preserved in institutions like ours. In other words, to ensure this story stays alive, we must tell it. Now, as you've heard, our journey to become the National World War II Museum didn't happen overnight or easily. It took a core group of committed advocates and supporters whose vision, determination, and steadfast belief in our mission made it possible. We've heard from Nick about Dr. Stephen Ambrose's pursuit for all generations to understand the unique American spirit that ensured Allied victory. But it was also Nick's entrepreneurial spirit that ensured we became America's National World War II Museum. We endured challenging times like Hurricane Katrina and emerged from them stronger. We completed this magnificent 7-pavilion vision of the campus laid out in the original master plan more than 20 years ago. We've developed meaningful educational programs that reach far beyond our walls and become one of the top museums not only in this country, but in the world. So Nick, your contributions to the museum's success are unmatched, and we all thank you again for charting us on this journey that brought us here. So one more round of applause for Nick Mueller, please. I'm going to emphasize something that we've touched on already this morning, but it took many partners and supporters to help open these doors 25 years ago on June 6, 2000. The National Board of Directors for the then National D-Day Museum, the members of our Founders Society, who are proudly still listed in the Hall of Heroes in the Louisiana Memorial Pavilion. The state of Louisiana, from the earliest days, has been a steadfast supporter of this museum and continues to help us push forward. The University of New Orleans, who, as Nick told us last night, for that first 10 years, had it not been for their support in so many ways, there would be no D-Day Museum, and there certainly would be no World War II Museum. Our community partners, our donors, and I want to give a special mention to Frank and Paulette Stewart, whose generous capstone gift ensured the build-out of the Louisiana Memorial Pavilion. Our exhibit designers, our architects, and the incredible staff and volunteers, those that are working here today, and all of you that have served this mission over the last 25 years. So thank you to all of you. Your early support was instrumental in validating the importance of our work, and it's the reason we are here today. So my thanks. So 25 years later, we have this world-renowned campus. 10.5 million people have walked through these doors over the last 25 years from every corner of this country. Almost 90% of the visitors that come to this museum come from outside the state of Louisiana. This truly is a national museum that touches every part of our country. Our educational programs have become the gold standard for teaching of World War II and have reached almost 2 million students in middle and high schools across Louisiana and the entire country. And our digital content and programs have made this history more accessible than ever. In the last year alone, 30 million people have engaged with our digital content. And very importantly, we are proud to preserve and protect the preeminent collection on the American experience in World War II, which now includes 300,000 artifacts, and perhaps most important of all, 12,000 personal accounts from the men and women that served during the war. And today, almost 5,000 hours of that testimony is accessible online. It's these gripping stories, these artifacts, these programs that we continue to highlight that really bring forward the values of the World War II generation: sacrifice, determination, courage, and unity. And we believe these values have never been more important, and that the history of the war has never been more relevant. So there's more work to do to fulfill the mission and the vision of this museum. And as we mark our 25th anniversary, we find ourselves at another critical moment in our institutional journey. It's been nearly 80 years since the war ended. Each day, of course, there are fewer members of the World War II generation with us whose voices keep their stories alive. As time marches on, fewer and fewer Americans understand the history of the war, including why it was fought and how it was won. So, we believe, with the passing of time, the museum's work to teach, to learn, to remember, to inspire is more critical than ever. So today, we make a promise to you, the World War II generation. We make a promise to all of you in this room who have helped build this museum. And we make a promise to future generations to ensure that everyone can always be inspired by this unprecedented time in our nation's history. So to uphold this promise in the years ahead, we will engage more visitors through our museum's world-class exhibits on our campus and across the country. We will embrace innovation and technology to expand access to the museum's unparalleled collections, resources, and expertise. And we will inspire more students, teachers, and lifelong learners of all ages through our educational programs and resources. In all these areas, we must continue to build upon all that has been accomplished over the last quarter century. So today, and you may have seen this on your chairs, we announce our new $300 million Victories Promise campaign to ensure that we can continue to grow and have this educational impact, not just for 25 years, but for another 125 years and beyond. Now this commitment, yes, thank you. We believe this commitment is just as ambitious as the promise Stephen Ambrose, Nick Mueller, our board, and our early donors made 25 years ago when they opened these doors. And it will require all of us, all freedom-loving people, to achieve it. We know it's possible. Look what we've accomplished. Before Victories Promise, our Road to Victory capital campaign raised $420 million to ensure the build-out of this magnificent 7-pavilion campus. And much of that campaign's success can be traced to the leadership of Louis Freeman, the first chair of the Capital Campaign Steering Committee, and a gentleman here with us this morning, Governor Pete Wilson, who took the reins as chair of the Campaign Steering Committee in 2008. When governor, we know the number was much smaller than 420 at that time. Pete has also served on our board of trustees for the past 23 years, including his time as board chairman from 2006 to 2009. As Nick knows, crucial years as we struggled to survive and push forward coming out of Hurricane Katrina. But ever since meeting Stephen Ambrose in 1999 at the Congressional Medal of Honor Society Convention in Riverside, California, Pete has been a champion of this museum and the legacy of the World War II generation. Over the past 2 decades, he has demonstrated his commitment to the museum through his servant leadership, wise counsel, and generous support. And today, I'm honored, delighted, and privileged to announce that Pete and his wife, Gail Wilson, have already generously committed $1 million to the Victories Promise campaign. So thank you, Pete and Gail. Pete and Gail, in recognition of your leadership and support of our museum for over 20 years, I'm proud to present you both with an American flag flown this morning during our H-hour remembrance service on the Governor Wilson Liberty Flagstaff on Founders Plaza. Thank you for all you have done, Pete and Gail. It's been truly extraordinary. And of course, central to every successful campaign is early and significant support. And to that end, I would also like to thank Peggy and Timber Floyd for their early investment, and also recognize museum trustee Kevin Clifford, whose major commitment and match challenge to our board last winter has marshaled significant early investments for our endowment. So Kevin, thank you, sir, for your generosity and for your leadership. And I'd also like to recognize those other current and former trustees who have made their own commitments to the new campaign. David and Patricia Nierenberg, Bob Hayes, Greg Kowalski, Phil and Jennifer Satry, Glenn Solomon and his family, Mike Bylan, Jimmy Reese, and of course, the state of Louisiana. I am proud to announce that these individuals and other early supporters have together committed more than $40 million to our capital, education, and endowment goals, the three legs of this new campaign. Let's give all of these leaders a round of applause for their commitment. So only 260 to go. We're off to a good start. So we know this is just a beginning, and I invite all of you to join me in this promise to ensure that we never forget this important history. And that begins today. It begins right now by closing this ceremony by giving the last words to our World War II veterans as we close this program, so that we may never forget. Thank you.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you this important bulletin from the United Press.
I was angry that our ships were sunk and people were killed. I was going to get back at them.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
I didn't know how it would affect me at the time, but I certainly soon found out.
I enlisted the day after, which was a Monday. Tried to get permission from my father.
I was still 17.
It was a new world for me. I didn't even know they had blacks training as Marines. As an Afro-American going to be in the Marines, it was a proud moment.
I heard on the radio that the Marines were going to enlist women. I'm going to apply.
Yeah, I was scared all the time. We all were scared.
When they first started coming at us, I said, they're trying to kill me.
First, I had to change from a civilian to a soldier. Then I had to change from a soldier to a killer. The whole country was at war. 1 out of every 4 employees in war plants were women.
The home front was unbelievable. The unity and the sacrifice.
Bastogne was tough, cold. We went through holy hell.
We took an awful lot of flak, and I seen one of our planes was hit, and I thought to myself, those boys are not going to make it.
It was a brutal, brutal war. If you were able to survive it, you were one of the lucky few.
Who knows if we didn't beat Hitler, what would have happened?
You can imagine the feeling that the war's over. It's something you can't explain.
It made me a greater American. Made me feel that I'd done what I was supposed to do. I want to give the boys credit that never made it home. Their parents, their mothers, their fathers. They are the ones that really sacrificed.
When I walked into the museum, I called my wife. And I said, do you need to walk with me? I see the D-17 hanging there overhead. I said, that needs to be taught.
The people that come after really do need to be reminded of it, and I think this museum is doing a terrific job.
There's few veterans that are left, there are few survivors that are left that can tell them firsthand that was there.
This city is much better off because of the World War II Museum. May it grow, may it prosper, may it continue to serve as a reminder of what freedom's all about.
Heroes. Those that died. I did my job, they did theirs, and we should be eternally grateful for this wonderful country.
Our kids need to know what this nation was made of.
After World War II, we became a super nation for one reason. The people were together.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in giving thanks one more time to the heroes and survivors of World War II. May we always honor their courage and sacrifice. Thank you for being with us to honor them this morning.